In the modern world, existence begins quietly, not with memory, not with consciousness, but with a record, a name typed into a system, a date stamped onto paper, a place registered and archived. Long before a person understands language or identity, their presence is confirmed by documents they will never see. These records sit silently in government buildings, databases, and vaults, untouched for decades, trusted, assumed permanent, rarely questioned. But what if, in a single night, those records vanished? Imagine waking up in a familiar place, in a familiar state, under a familiar sky. Roads are still there, homes remain occupied, schools open, hospitals operate. Life appears unchanged, yet beneath this surface normality, something essential is missing. Somewhere in the administrative heart of Louisiana, millions of birth records no longer exist. No announcement is made, no alarms sound, no emergency broadcasts interrupt the morning routine. The systems simply return empty results where certainty once lived. At first, no one notices. Birth certificates are rarely needed daily. Most people do not carry proof of their origin in their pockets. Weeks pass, then months. It is only when renewal forms are rejected, when applications stall, when background checks fail, that the absence reveals itself. A clerk hesitates. A screen displays an error. A request for verification leads nowhere. The question begins quietly, passed between offices and departments, never spoken publicly. If there is no record of your birth, can the system still recognize you? Identity in the modern world is not defined by memory or community alone. It is defined by validation, a sequence of confirmations linking a person to a recognized beginning. Without that beginning, every other claim becomes fragile. Citizenship, education, healthcare, property ownership, voting rights, employment, travel. Each depends on a foundational proof that now no longer exists. The person remains physically present, yet legally uncertain, not erased from life, but from recognition. In this scenario, Louisiana does not descend into chaos. There are no riots, no visible collapse. Instead, something quieter takes hold, a slow administrative paralysis. Requests pile up, appeals are filed, temporary exceptions are issued then quietly withdrawn. Systems designed for verification cannot verify what is missing. Officials rely on secondary documents, then tertiary ones. But every document ultimately points back to the same vanished source. The circle never closes. For those born decades earlier, memories remain. Family photographs exist. Witnesses are alive. Yet memory is not admissible evidence. Photographs can be staged. Testimonies can be disputed. The system was never built to trust people. It was built to trust records. And when records disappear, trust collapses inward, becoming suspicion. Hospitals face an unexpected dilemma. New births must be registered, but against what historical framework? Schools encounter students whose identities cannot be fully confirmed. Employers hesitate, not out of malice, but compliance. Financial institutions freeze accounts tied to unverifiable identities. Each decision is justified internally, procedurally correct, legally cautious. No single action feels cruel, yet the outcome is devastating. Some attempt to rebuild their existence from fragments, old baptism certificates, census entries, insurance documents. But these too depend on prior validation, a copy of a copy referencing an origin that no longer exists. The system was never designed for recovery, only for continuity. Once broken, it does not know how to heal itself. Over time, a silent division forms, those whose records survived and those whose did not divided by wealth, race, or belief, but by administrative survival. A new form of invisibility emerges, not enforced by law, but by absence. People still speak, work, love, and age, yet their legal shadow fades. They exist, but cannot prove why. The most unsettling realization arrives slowly. This erasure did not require force, no invasion, no violence, no public decree. It required only silence and deletion, a reminder that modern identity is not held by individuals, but by institutions, and institutions, unlike memory, can forget instantly. In the end, the question is not whether such a scenario could happen. Systems fail, records are lost, databases corrupt. The deeper question is what existence truly means in a world where proof outweighs presence, where being alive is not enough, where history is not remembered but stored, and where a person's beginning can disappear without a sound. What if, overnight, you were still here, but officially you had never been born?
As the months stretch into years, the absence of those records begins to reshape lives in ways no one predicted. Children grow into adults carrying a quiet uncertainty they cannot name. They feel it during routine moments, when a form asks for proof, when an official pauses too long, when a system refuses to acknowledge what everyone around them knows to be true. They are real, they breathe, they contribute, yet the world of verification treats them as incomplete. Communities adapt in subtle ways. Neighbors vouch for neighbors, employers bend rules, local officials offer temporary workarounds that exist in legal gray zones. But these adaptations are fragile. They rely on trust rather than authority, and trust has limits. When leadership changes, when audits arrive, when systems update, those informal solutions vanish. What remains is the original absence, unresolved and growing heavier with time. For some, the loss of identity becomes generational. Children born to parents without verified records inherit the uncertainty. Their births are registered, but their lineage cannot be fully traced. A crack forms in the continuity of history, small at first, then widening. Family trees end abruptly. Ancestral connections dissolve into speculation. The past becomes something that cannot be proven, only believed. Institutions begin to feel the strain. Courts struggle to establish legal standing. Property disputes emerge where ownership once seemed settled. Without reliable records, inheritance becomes contested, delayed, or denied. The law, built on documentation, finds itself unable to resolve conflicts rooted in missing origins. Justice slows not because of corruption, but because certainty has been erased. Healthcare systems encounter ethical dilemmas. Medical histories rely on identity continuity. Vaccination records, genetic predispositions, long-term treatment plans all depend on accurate identification. When records cannot confirm who a patient is or where they come from, care becomes cautious, incomplete, not out of neglect but liability. Each hesitation carries consequences that compound silently over time. Outside Louisiana, the world watches closely. Other states review their archives. Governments quietly audit their systems, not out of empathy, but fear. The scenario reveals an uncomfortable truth. Modern societies are not held together by shared values alone, but by data, and data, unlike memory, is vulnerable to deletion, corruption, and neglect. Public conversations begin to shift, not around whether people exist, but around whether existence must be provable to matter. Philosophers debate, legal scholars publish papers, media discussions remain careful, restrained, unwilling to inflame panic. The absence becomes normalized, discussed in academic language that fails to capture its human cost. Some individuals attempt to leave. Travel becomes difficult. Borders demand certainty. Without foundational records, movement is restricted. The world shrinks, not physically, but administratively. Opportunities fade not because of lack of ability, but lack of recognition. Talent goes undocumented. Potential remains unacknowledged. Over time, a quiet resilience emerges. People redefine belonging through community rather than certification. They find meaning in presence rather than permission. Yet even this resilience exists in tension with reality, Because while society may adapt emotionally, systems do not. Algorithms do not sympathize, databases do not reflect, they either confirm or they deny. Eventually, the question no longer feels hypothetical, it becomes personal. It surfaces in conversations, in silences, in unspoken fears. If records define us, then who are we without them? And if our beginnings can vanish overnight, what else do we trust that exists only because it has not yet been erased? The scenario leaves behind no dramatic ending, no resolution, no restoration of what was lost, only a lingering awareness that modern existence is thinner than it appears, that identity is not carved into stone, but stored on servers, and that the quietest failures are often the most permanent. In a world that remembers everything digitally, forgetting has become the most powerful force of all.
As time moves on, the disappearance of those records begins to influence behavior itself. People grow cautious, not just in what they do, but in what they attempt. Ambition narrows. Long-term plans are postponed or quietly abandoned. When futures depend on verification, uncertainty becomes a ceiling no one openly acknowledges. Dreams shrink not from lack of desire, but from administrative doubt. Younger generations, having never known the certainty of formal recognition, adapt differently. They develop a strange dual awareness, present in society yet unanchored to it. They learn early that systems do not respond to truth, only to confirmation. This understanding shapes their worldview. They trust people more than institutions, and memory more than records. Yet they also sense the fragility of this trust, knowing it holds no authority beyond the moment. Education systems feel the shift. Diplomas and certifications lose their weight when foundational identities are disputed. Knowledge remains, but proof of learning becomes conditional. Careers that rely on licensing and background verification become inaccessible. Entire professions quietly close their doors to those who cannot produce a complete paper trail. The loss is not dramatic, but cumulative, reducing possibilities year by year. Economically, the effects spread slowly, like a shadow lengthening at sunset. Informal work increases, cash replaces contracts, accountability weakens. Without reliable identity verification, enforcement becomes selective and inconsistent. This does not create lawlessness, but imbalance. Some are scrutinized heavily, others overlooked entirely. The absence of records reshapes fairness itself. Political participation fades almost unnoticed. Voting requires recognition. Representation requires registration. As more individuals fall outside verified systems, their voices disappear from decision-making processes, not silenced by force, but filtered out by procedure. Policies continue to be written, budgets approved, futures planned, without accounting for those who cannot be formally counted. Culturally, the idea of legacy changes. Without secure records, history becomes unstable. Stories replace archives. Oral memory regains importance but loses reach. What is not documented struggles to survive beyond a generation. The sense of permanence that once accompanied existence erodes, replaced by a quiet impermanence that seeps into identity itself. Some begin to question whether the loss was accidental at all, not as accusation, but as reflection. Systems are designed with priorities. They protect what they value. When something disappears completely, it raises uncomfortable possibilities about what was deemed essential and what was not. The absence invites speculation, not because answers exist, but because silence creates space for doubt. Attempts at reconstruction emerge, committees form, digital recovery initiatives are announced, but rebuilding identity from fragments proves nearly impossible. Data integrity cannot be recreated retroactively. Trust, once broken, cannot be simply restored. New records lack historical weight. They confirm presence going forward, but cannot rewrite the past. The emotional toll deepens. People begin to feel unrooted, disconnected from time itself. Birth, once a fixed point, becomes uncertain. Age becomes approximate, history becomes negotiable. Without a recorded beginning, the sense of permanence fractures. Individuals exist in an extended present, unable to fully anchor themselves to what came before. Yet life continues. Children are born, seasons change, communities persist. The world does not end. Instead, it transforms quietly into something thinner, more fragile, more conditional, a place where existence is no longer assumed but constantly validated. And somewhere beneath all of it lies the realization that modern civilization does not collapse loudly, it erodes silently, not through destruction, but through omission, not by removing people from the world, but by removing the world's ability to recognize them. What began as missing records becomes a lesson in vulnerability, a reminder that identity, once believed inherent, is now outsourced, stored, dependent, and that when the systems we trust forget us, we are left to ask whether being alive was ever enough.